Hi, it's Rachel Maldonado, and I am with Pete Parada, musician extraordinaire. And Pete, we are talking about the masculinity crisis. What
All
do you
right. What do I think? That's a broad question. I think that the discussion of the toxic masculinity has been kind of bizarre. Like it feels like the social outrage moves around to all these different options and landed on this one for a while, and it seems to have stuck. And I can, to me, when someone says toxic masculinity, I don't see it as like, oh, we're saying no one can be, you know, masculine or whatever. But for some people, that's what it is. It's just like, no, all masculinity is toxic, and I don't think so. I think if you're when I hear toxic masculinity, I think of like dudes that are racking up body counts and just, being with
Mm,
all lots of different women, which it's none of my business, but it just feels a little like there's not a connection there,
mm,
to me that's ego. And so yeah, if you got an overinflated ego and you're abusive towards females and stuff, then yeah, that's toxic. I understand that, but I don't think masculinity in general is a bad thing. And I think when we're seeing a lack of it in society, it causes harm. Like for me, I think masculinity is being there for your community, showing up for your community, taking
mm.
care of your family, being able to stand up
Yes.
for them and defend them. Like that's masculine. That's a job. And I don't think it needs to be more complicated than that. If we want to cancel James Bond because of toxic masculinity, that just seems like outrage mob nonsense.
Mm,
But, if you're taking care of your family, taking care of your kids, raising them right, like that's masculinity, and there's nothing wrong with that. Standing up for what's right, there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think when people start yelling about this, it's the same virtue signaling crusader mob
mm,
that just gets on board with every new thing every morning. It's like,
mm.
oh, what, we're mad at masculinity today, okay, here we go. And you just, like people that show up at protests and they don't really know what they're protesting, but they saw one and so they got in line.
Yes.
It's it's bizarre. So I don't I I understand that probably someone started this with good faith and a good idea, but like all good ideas, it got co-opted and turned into something that doesn't represent the original plan to begin with. And I think this is one of those things where the train just kind of went off the rails pretty early on, and nobody really can even understand what they're angry about.
Mm.
They just know that they were told to be angry.
And you're in the music industry and have people, musicians, those you know, do they glom on to the latest thing? Is that popular to do? Or how is it? What do you know?
If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have said, no way. Musicians are artists and they stand up for, they push back. That's what rock music is supposed to do, is
Mm,
question authority and push back against, you know, un unlawful mandates and things. But after the last 4 years, I don't know that, I look at a lot of artists and I was like, do you still play that song about, against authority with a straight face? Do you still do that after what allowed to happen? You didn't stand up at all. You have nothing to say. Like, did it ever mean anything, or was it just fashion? So
mm,
I I think in the music industry as a whole right now, there's a lot of fear. And I
oh,
don't, because everyone's afraid to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, because the list of things you can't talk about or be for or against, it's updated hourly. And you find yourself on the wrong side of it. And it can be a legacy ender, not just a like, oh, you're in the hot seat for 5 minutes. Like, I think
mm,
the whole music industry right now is in, especially with artists that have been around longer, it's legacy protection mode. That's where everybody
wow.
is. Everyone's afraid to speak. They're afraid to sing about anything real. They're afraid to take a stand or pick a side that's not popular. And, so to me, that's super boring. I don't think
Oh,
you can't create good art in a place of fear. And I think fear is a terrible motivator. for anything. Like obviously, if you're the government or you're an authoritarian regime, fear is your best friend. Like,
Yes.
you can do a lot with a little, but if you're an artist, you can't create from a place of fear. Like I watch stand-up comedians and I'm like, man, that is a tightrope right now. Like how like, are you allowed to be funny? Are you allowed to point anything out? Or are we back to like airline food? Am I right? Like like is that where we're headed? Because everything is off limits. It's like
Oh, wow.
the old South Park episode of Christmas where, they're not allowed to celebrate any traditional, it can't be Christian, it can't be Jewish and this, and the kids are just on stage in gray jumpsuits spinning in a circle, just yelling happy, happy, happy. It's like
Mhm.
we can't have an opinion on anything. And for art, I think that's terribly boring. And it's so we're in a bit of a lull right now of, in film, everything has got to be intellectual property. There's not a lot of original ideas. But when someone does get an original idea through the system that's good, it goes gangbusters because people are hungry for that. They're hungry to hear something real. And I think there's a real opportunity here for us all to get back to a place of being genuine human beings and just having an opinion and stop being so divided. And I think the toxic masculinity conversation is much in the same vein. It's just,
Mm.
well, I was told that I have to be angry about this, and I don't want to get called out for not being angry about this, because that's the other option here is now it's not just enough to be on the side of supporting the thing that everyone's demanding you
Mhm.
support. Now, if you won't, you get in trouble for not saying
Mm.
anything. And so it's crazy to me that the cancel mob will come after someone and go, well, you've got an opportunity here to do the right thing, or we're going to take you out. And it's hilarious. It's like, no, this isn't my wheelhouse. I don't have anything to say. Like, you should be able to comment on that. Like, not everybody needs to have an opinion on everything. I think that's what social media has,
Ooh.
on top of all the other terrible things that it's done to us. It's given us all this feeling that no matter what the issue,
Mm.
I must have an opinion and everyone must hear it.
Mm.
And it's just like, that is a lot of ego out there to feel like every idea you have must be voiced because the public deserves it and demands it. And it's like, no, they'll be fine. Go make a sandwich.
Yeah. And masculinity, being proud of who you are, being a man, creativity, you're a musician. Do you feel like you can have these?
I feel like I can, but we spoke earlier about, the cancellation and stuff. And when you go through something where you're kind of removed from a situation and you
Mm.
have to find a new way forward, it's very freeing. So for me, I don't live from a place of worrying. Like if I have an opinion that I think is important or interesting or something, I'll voice it. But if there's something that's just not my business or not my wheelhouse, I don't feel the need to wade into it just because everyone is required to have an opinion. You're not, it's okay to not. But if you're the masculinity discussion, it's a strange scenario because like my wife and I, not consciously, but she's been a very traditional wife. Like she
Mhm.
homeschooled our kids, which is,
Wow.
unpopular in a lot of places. Like, I was traveling a lot, and for us at first, that made
Yes.
sense because they could come out and travel with me, and we didn't, it was very hard to have to answer to the school system because
Right.
they get their funding for every day that your kid's there. And if you're not going to be there for
Mm.
2 weeks, they won't allow it. They'll say, no, you can't do that. We're going to lose too much funding. And it's like, regardless of whether your kids
Wow.
are going to go to Japan or have this cultural experience, the school is like, no, they've got to sit here and be a zombie all
Wow.
day. So yeah, so we sort of fell into this thing that, and I know that she has taken grief for it from, friends and people over the years of like, hey, you should be, not devoting yourself just to your children or this or that. But it wasn't like it was conscious, like you're going to stay home and I'm going to make all the money. That's
Mhm.
just what worked for us. And it happened organically. It
Yes.
wasn't in it. And, it's certainly something that we both struggled with because I want to make sure that she's fulfilled. But this is something that has meant a lot to her. And like even yesterday, we had a situation with one of our kids that was a hard day to get through. And she said last night, she's like, I'm grateful to have been home and
Yes.
available for this experience. And she didn't go through this alone, or
Yes.
God forbid, I'd
Yes.
never heard about it at all.
Mm.
And so it's not just yesterday's incident or, or like the good and the bad and the achievements and the heartbreak. Like she's been there for every one of them. She's been there for
Yes.
every day, where I've missed performances and holidays and things. She's been there for everyone. And I think that's worked for our family and that's been so beneficial to our kids. And it's, she has no regrets there and I have no regrets there. And as we
Yes.
get to the end of this, you know, kind of this phase of our parenting journey, like we're
Mhm.
never going to be done, but our kids are 20 and 16 and you have a little bit more space now and she still homeschools our 16-year-old
Yes.
the same way that she did when she was 5. Like she's very involved and very making sure that everything is correct and going the way that it should. And that's for our family has been a real blessing. So and I don't think that's a a detriment. I know that she's
Mhm.
had a lot of friends over the years that don't understand it or really have a problem with it. And it's like, well, you're leaving everything on your husband to do all this, and he's a musician. And what if everything goes wrong? Then you'll have nothing. And it's just like, that assumption that musicians are all dirtbags too. That's a fun one to
Mm.
navigate. But um, it just was never about anybody else's expectations or anybody else's needs. It was just this is organically what has worked out for us and our family. And so I'm grateful for that, and she's grateful for that, and it's been beneficial to our kids. So the discussion that, some people would look at that and say, well, that's toxic masculinity. You're out there traveling the world and doing on an adventure and doing whatever you want. But for me, I notice the importance of the masculine energy in the home. Like,
Mm.
and she'll say it, and my kids will say it when I was gone. And if there's any regret, it's for me, it's that realizing now, like that my absence wasn't just, well, dad's not here. It's like, well, no, there's no masculine energy here. It was just
Ooh.
3 girls in the house. My wife said she can feel the difference when I'm home. There's a different energy, and it's not just that I'm here. It's just nature. It's a real phenomenon that it makes a difference. So, I at this point in my career, I choose to be home more than on tour. And because it's important to me to be like, okay, yeah, that was a long stretch for them to like. So if I'm gonna go and leave for a long period of time, like I'll do short runs with groups that I like. But if it's something really long, like we're gonna have a talk about it to see if it's worth it. Way how is that going to be for our family at this point and where we're at instead of, at sometimes you're in a job or a situation where you don't have any say. And I was in that for
Mhm.
a long time where it's like, well, I just got the tour dates and they overlap with your birthday.
Mm,
Sorry, we're gonna miss
so
that again. Or, and you can't have a say in it. So now that with the way that I work now, I have the ultimate say in everything and I can say
yeah.
no. And I say no a lot now, which is nice. Because
Wow.
that's what's best for the family. And I don't think that's toxic masculinity. That's me taking care of my family and making sure that we're intact as a unit and that everyone is in a good place emotionally.
Mm. At the core of masculinity is that you protect women and children. And for you, you have made family, taking care of the family, protecting the family a priority.
Yeah, that's number one. I mean, and that
Yeah.
and that stems not just from me, but from my wife and I together. The way that we've parented this entire journey is, the kids come first and the family comes first. And so I don't think that's an outlandish thing, but it really is outside of the norm of the last 20 years in
Mm,
society where more and more both both parents have to work and we need two incomes to get by. And I just feel like it more than having an extra income, it's more important that our kids are covered at all times. Like somebody's there if they're having
mm,
having a problem or an issue. Like I said, my wife was here for every day of it,
yes.
and every high and every low, she was there to be with them. And I don't think you can replace that. And to know how many of those things that she would have missed if we were both at work all day or gone. Um, I think that's detrimental. Would in our situation would have been
Mhm.
detrimental to our kids. So
Mm.
I'm grateful for the way that, again, just organically worked out for our family that we're kind of weird. We do our own thing. We're certainly not what anyone would call normal, but I don't know what normal is anymore. For us, it worked.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
I wouldn't say that it's a perfect system. It's not for, I can only speak from my own experience and what's worked for us. And it's been a really nice, couple of decades here raising kids together.
Mm. I'm fascinated, Pete, by the masculine energy. You're in the music industry. Have you noticed that regardless of the current thing, that women still like masculine energy? You're in the music industry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been married a long time, so I'm kind of oblivious to any of that. But I grew up in the 80s idolizing like the hair metal bands that were wearing makeup and stuff. I mean, I wouldn't describe any of that as terribly masculine, but even at that time, females reacted to it. Girls were excited about it. I so I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one. To me, it's if you're masculine, you're showing up for people in a way
Mm.
that you're responsible. And I think responsibility is probably a better conversation or a better word to use than masculinity because now it's
Ooh.
got such an asterisk next to masculinity now because it's been dragged through the mud so much. But I really feel like it's kind of coming back around like everything that the cancel mob comes for. It burns fast over the top of it, and then people kind of are a bit dazed and they're like, "Ah, that was weird. Why did we all get wrapped up into that?" But you
Mm.
do, there's a new outrage distraction every day to if you take the bait, you're gonna go on the ride. And to
Mm.
me, being masculine is being responsible and not just for your
Ooh.
family, but for your community. I think if we all put a little bit more effort into our local communities and stuff instead of looking at the world as a whole and going, well, it's a dumpster fire. What can I do?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like, well, you can start local. How are your neighbors doing? You okay? Like, check in on your friends and your family and see what people need. What can you do in a small circle? Because that's where everything begins. And then, let it widen from there. But have responsibility to your local community, I think is
Mm.
a good place to be. And
Responsibility. That is masculinity. I
yeah,
really like that.
thanks. Yeah, I mean
Wow.
that's what it means to me. So,
Yes.
your mileage may vary.
And for the young guys or any man, what tip would you have for them for having responsibility or taking responsibility to be a man?
I think it's have responsibility, but have respect for people.
Mm.
Whether it's women, whether it's your
Yes.
coworkers, whatever. Have respect for people in general. Respect their time, show up on time. Respect their efforts there, be constructive in your criticism. Like check your ego at the door and try to find common ground. I think that's the thing that we've lost, especially in the last 8 to 10 years, is this division
Yes.
has been sown from, the people running the show to keep us all distracted like a bunch of fire ants down here and not paying any attention to what's actually going on. And so if you can disconnect from your ego
Mm.
and look at a situation and just look at each person with respect, because you have something to learn from everyone you interact with. Like every day I'll look at something and be like, "Oh, I just bumped into
Mm.
this person for a reason. What is it here? What can I
Mm.
learn here?" And it's the same whether you're in a musical environment or what. Like I don't ever like to be in a project where I feel like I'm the most accomplished musician in the room because there's not
Mm.
any room for growth there. There's not a lot to learn there. Um, so it's the same with your interactions. It's just like, oh, well, why did I bump into this person today? What do they need from me? How can I be of service here? And and I think when you look at every individual with respect, then you open your mind to connecting with them and connecting with your community. And instead of being in our own world
Yes.
of individual adventures and just worrying about, well, what do I need today? That's like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna meet my needs and I'm gonna get that there, but that doesn't have to be the entirety of my day. Like,
Mm.
what else does my community need from me? If I can make my community better and you can make your community better, we can make the world better as a whole, but I think it starts a lot more local than we're willing to look at.
Mm. And for the respect piece, was there a man, a friend of yours, anyone that really respected you or that you respected? Like, can you tell me how this looks?
Hmm. Oh, like, is there anyone in particular that's modeled after?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it would come from a man. I think a lot of my
Ooh,
respect has come from my wife. Like the amount
wow.
that she's taught me in almost 20 years together. Like I've grown leaps and bounds as a person, and she keeps me in check. Like, so I think a lot of the qualities that I appreciate of myself are things that have been newer and developed since I met her. And
Mm,
so, your question makes me jump to like, oh, was it my father? Was it my, favorite drummer? Was it a teacher or whatever? But I jump to her because
wow.
everything kind of traces back to her. Like that's my support system, and that's the person that I not I guess beholden isn't the right word, feel beholden to, but that's the
Yes.
person that I feel responsible to because
Mm,
we're, going through this world together. We're taking care of each other. We're raising kids together. So
mm,
that's where my focus is. So I think any advancement that I've made in my own self and my personal life has stemmed from her more than some other male influence.
yes, so interesting. And Pete, any last thoughts on the masculinity crisis?
I it's I don't know because it's such a strange phenomenon
Right?
that we even are having a conversation about this.
I
Like
know.
I I shudder to think of like what the next wave of outrage is going to be towards. If we're and like I said earlier, if you want to be mad at men who are womanizers or abusive or
Mm,
I don't stand for any of that. Absolutely,
yes.
that's toxic. That's not respectful. It's not responsible. That's just selfish and ego and individualist. And I've known people like that. Obviously, we all have throughout our lives. And I
Mm,
wouldn't describe any of those men as particularly happy. Like they're
mm,
battling their own demon or whatever. But I don't think it's fair to take out your demons on another person or a group of people like that. So I obviously will acknowledge that there's toxic aspects to anything in the world. Like there's nothing is all good, nothing is all bad. But I think when this gets lumped into all male energy is
yes.
bad for all people and it should be abolished, I think that's nonsense. And it feels like we're moving past that, thankfully, but it's these, yeah, right. Fingers crossed. But to me, I think if we can get back to a place of respect, there's nothing toxic about that. There's nothing
Mm,
toxic about male energy. There's nothing toxic about being masculine if it's coming from a place of what the true definition was, which is, taking care of people, defending your family, defending your values.
wow.
I don't see anything toxic in that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pete Parada.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is fun.